Welcome everyone to our first session of the day. I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker, Shirley. We are starting with such a powerful topic today, accessibility. And Shirley's talk when she applied really stood out because she wasn't just speaking from a place of experience and authority, but also from an individual who has low vision. So she's really experienced firsthand the impact of poor accessibility and how that can impact you, and has used that to really fuel her own research and also her experiments. She also speaks from a place of authority. She's an experimenter at Online Dialogue, and recently at Experimentation Elite, we got to see her not go up on stage, not once, not twice, but 3 times to collect 3 different awards that they got for their outstanding work helping with clients. So we're really excited to have Shirley here today. She's going to be disputing some accessibility myths that we might be believing still, and also helping us understand how to deal better with the latest regulation changes. I just want to ask you all, like, it's always a bit nerve-wracking as an online speaker. You can't see everyone, but even if we can't see you, please just do a big virtual round of applause for Shirley and welcome her here on stage today. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you definitely for the good intro, and good afternoon or morning, everyone. My name is Shirley van Haalem, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that's really close to my heart, and that is digital accessibility. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm also so happy to see you all here, CRO experts, researchers, designers from various companies, because that means that you understand the importance of this topic or want to know more about it. So that's so awesome. Thank you for joining, and let's get started right away. And I want to start off with a bit of a personal story, because as not a lot of people know for me is that I'm visually impaired myself. I navigate the digital world with low vision, and I want to show you a screen recording of how I do that. So let's get started. So I'm using my Zoom tool, and the Zoom tool is really my best friend, because that makes me it makes me able to read the text. For example, here I'm looking for an online dialogue article, and as you can see in the recording, sometimes I zoom in, sometimes I scan some texts. Later on, I will copy paste some text, and for me, this is really the way to be able to work or read the text, because otherwise I have to be really close to the screen, which would not be that efficient. But yeah, for some of you, this also might not look really sufficient or efficient, because yeah, I move from left to right to left to right, and I zoom in a lot. But as I already mentioned, for me, this is the only way to be able to work. And what works for me might not be enough for others who have, for example, even more severe visual impairments or other disabilities. So they depend heavily on how accessible digital domains are. And that's why I find it really nice to be here today to talk about this topic. Not again. And I really recently had to use this Zoom tool because friends from Convert, sorry guys, I love you, but this image was really small. So I had to zoom in a lot to be able to see that I am the first speaker of today, which is awesome. So let's dive right in of today's session. So what I'm going to cover today are 3 main topics. So at first, I want to start off with defining digital accessibility and why it's so important. But the most important part of my talk will be about digital accessibility myth busting. And that's also why there's the Mythbusters logo on the right. It's really important with a topic like this. There are myths buzzing around, misunderstandings, misconceptions, and today we're going to bust them together. What I'm not going to do today is run you through all the rules of the European Accessibility Act, because as you can see, it's a lot and I only have 30 minutes. But I am going to help you define what the European Accessibility Act is about, and also why it's important for us as digital professionals. So this European Accessibility Act, what is it? You might have heard from it. When you're not in Europe, I can explain it. The European Accessibility Act is a crucial piece of legislation that requires companies to make their digital products accessible for everyone. And it's already in effect since 28th of June 2025, so not that long. All the companies in the European Union need to comply to the European Accessibility Act. So this act is all about, and the name says it all, accessibility. But what is digital accessibility? It's the inclusive practice of making digital domains usable by everyone, regardless of ability, context, and situation. And I especially underlined those last three words because it's really important to keep in mind that accessibility is not only good for people with disabilities, but it's also really context and situation dependent. And I will come back later to that later on in my presentation, but keep this in mind for now. So let's move on to the current state of digital accessibility, because how accessible are our digital domains nowadays? And I can already tell you it's not that good. So the Web IM Million is a study that is done every year on the top 1 million homepages worldwide, and it looks for accessibility errors. And out of that research in 2025, just before the law came into effect, a staggering 95% of those homepages had detected accessibility errors, with 51 errors each, an average. So that's not that good, right? And when you break those errors down, you see that there are a lot of faults or errors with low contrast settings. So for example, you have a button with a color and the text on that button is not good enough of a contrast. So people with, for example, color blindness are not able to read the text. This is the most common error. But also things like missing alternative text or missing form labels or empty links are common mistakes. And those are particularly relevant for people with, for example, screen reader software. So as I already mentioned, the current state of digital accessibility is not that good, but I'm really curious to see this same research next year when the law is in effect for a bit of a time. And now let's move on to the most important part of my talk, and that is accessibility myth busting. Because with a topic like this, for example, especially with the law coming in or in effect, companies are talking about it, CEOs are talking about it, and some of these myths that I will cover, you might already have heard them. They are really common myths, and we're going to bust them today. So let's get started. At first, the first myth, accessibility is just a checklist to tick off. And basically, it could be right. So you could say, okay, I have this law, I have this rules that I need to comply to. Check, check, I comply to the law. But it's so much more than that. Working with accessibility is a mindset and a way of working. Just like we, as experimenters, always talk about the experimentation mindset, this is the same, and it needs to change. And to illustrate this, I want to explain to you the difference between equality and equity. So on the left-hand side, you see an example of equality, right? Everyone gets the same wooden block in this case to be able to watch the game. And on the right-hand side is equity. Things get shifted around and everyone is able to watch the game. So again, equality, everyone gets the same thing. And equity, things get shifted around and everyone gets what they need. So imagine that these wooden blocks represent the building blocks or the fundaments of your website. If you give everyone the same experience, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is able to access your website. But if you give everyone an experience that they can choose for example, if you shift things around, if you make things optional, you can make sure that everyone is able to access your website. So in this case, the tall person doesn't need the wooden block, gives it to the small person. Everyone is happy and able to access. So this is really important, and equity is all about accessibility. And I have some real life examples with me from equity. So this is a model that you see appearing on a lot of Dutch governmental websites nowadays. And it's in Dutch, sorry, I will explain what it is. So with this model, people are able to, for example, read aloud the text, adjust the text size, or download an MP3. It's optional, you don't need to use it, but but if you want to, you can. Equity. And another example of equity is the dark mode. We see this happening on a lot of apps and websites. It's optional, you don't need to use it, but if you want to, you can. And this is also an example of equity. And we're now still busting the myth that accessibility is just a checklist to tick off. And I already mentioned that it's a mindset shift that we need to take. And the thing with mindsets is that it's all about biases. We all have biases, right? So exclusion happens when we solve problems using our own biases. And we're humans, we cannot really do anything about those biases in our head. But what we can do is be aware of them and act on them. And I have an example of a bias that is really common. For example, when you create a LinkedIn post, people are saying you need to use a lot of emojis for your post to stand out or gain engagement. And this is a bias, and people also do this. But the thing with, for blind people, they listen to the page. And if you overuse emojis in, for example, a LinkedIn post, for them, it will sound like this.
This clapping hands is clapping hands. What clapping hands? Screen clapping hands. Reader clapping hands. Users clapping hands. Here clapping hands. When clapping hands. You clapping hands. Overuse clapping hands. Emojis clapping hands.
Annoying, right? So yeah, please keep this in mind. This is a bias shift that you can already take in your daily life. Don't overuse emojis. Oh, not again. So the bias shift and the mindset shift is something that we have already done in the past. So it's not new. And it also, is illustrated in this example here. So this is a screenshot of the online dialogue website back in 2016, 8 years ago. And this was a piece of art back in the days, right? So all websites look like this basically. But what you can really see here is that it's fully desktop driven. And websites back in those days on your mobile phone looked like this. And good luck trying to reach the button over there. So it's totally not accessible on mobile phones. And back in those days, it was also a bit logical, right? Because in 2016, only 20% of your users were using your website on their mobile phones, let alone converting on them. So yeah, we sometimes looked at mobile, but it was just not mobile first. And now, if you look at the stat on the right, that was from 2024, 70%, so more than half of your users are using your website on their mobile phones. So there's no company, no CEO right now saying, nah, let's just not optimize for mobile. Mobile first is the standard. And just like we did this mindset shift for mobile, I hope that 8 years from now, no CEO is saying, nah, let's just not optimize for accessibility. And that it's embedded in the strategy and in the way of working. So the first myth, accessibility is just a checklist to tick off, is busted. And let's move on right to the second one. Accessibility is a big and separate task from regular work. And this one we hear quite often because it's seen as a huge project, a huge thing. And I believe that it should be there from the start. And that it's not extra work, but missing work. And we are already optimizing for accessibility. It is not new. It's not something we have to reinvent or we have to follow courses about. It's something we're already doing. And to illustrate this, I brought the boom model with me from Online Dialogue. So we as optimizers, we as Online Dialogue, we long know that combining data and psychology is key to define optimization strategies. And we've done this with our database with over 10,000 experiments, combining all those learnings, and we came up with these 5 optimization strategies that are key. And I'm not going to walk you through all of them, but I want to highlight one of them, and that is ability. Ability is all about making the desired behavior easier for your customers. And it happens to be the same thing as accessibility, because that's also about making behavior easier for your customers, removing barriers, but then for all your customers. And it also happens to be the #1 strategy when it comes to win rate business case and uplifts ability. So we're already doing it. And I have an example to illustrate that ability and accessibility are really the same. So on the left-hand side, you see a non-optimized dummy version of a website, and on the right-hand side, you see an optimized one, and we've made some changes. At first, we adjusted the page title. We made it shorter and more clear. So that's good for ability, right? Because everyone will be able to fastly read the text and scan it. But with this optimization, you will also comply to parts of the European Accessibility Act, so also good for accessibility. The second one, we added a product image. It's now clear for everyone, good for ability, but also for accessibility. And the last one, we adjusted the call to action button, we adjusted the size, the color, and the text. It's good for ability because it's a bigger click target, for example, but also good for accessibility. And the most heard part of this myth that we're now busting is that it's a big task, right? But small changes can already make a big difference. There are really cool tools on the market like this Chrome extension called Wave, where you can in seconds get a really detailed report and accessibility scan of your website. And practice what you preach, right? I run this accessibility scan on the Online Dialogue website. And what happened? All our hyperlinks were not compliant. So the light green text on the white background, the contrast setting was just not good enough for accessibility. So the cool thing about Wave is that you can also adjust the color in the tool itself. So you can move the bar all the way to the left to see how much darker shade of green you need to be compliant. So we came up with this shade of green. And we also added an underline for screen readers to easily be able to see that this is a hyperlink. So this optimization is a real small change, but it made a big difference. So the second myth, accessibility is a big and separate task from regular work, is also busted. And now let's move on to the most frequently heard one. The third myth, accessibility only affects a few people. And I really recently heard someone say, we are not going to change the entire website or redesign the entire website just for those few blind people. And this couldn't be further from the truth, because in fact, 1 in every 4 people needs accessibility support. And that is already 189 million people in the European Union alone, let alone worldwide. And to break this down, I have some key stats or facts about disabilities. Because did you know that 1 in 15 people have a visual impairment? And that is already 30 million people in the European Union that are affected. And this is also a fact that I didn't know. 1 in 12 men are colorblind. Colorblindness in almost 90% of the cases affects men. So it could be that there are some colorblind men in the audience today. And that is already 35 million people affected. And this next one is not about visual impairments. And up until now, I focused my presentation a lot on visual impairments because of my own personal story, of course. But the European Accessibility Act is also focusing on neurodivergent people, for example, people that have dyslexia. So 1 in 13 people have dyslexia. And it states that text on websites needs to be structured, simple, and easy to read. And this is already 34 million people affected. And the next one is a bit mean because it's not a disability, right? But what we also need to keep in mind is that 1 in 5 people are 65 years or older. And that is already 19 million people affected. So when you get older, your eyesight might worsen. You might not perceive the information like you did back in the days. So it's also super important to keep this in mind when optimizing for accessibility. It's way more than only disabilities. And last but not least, 80% of the disabilities are invisible. And that's not only to me, but in general. It could be that, for example, your colleague or someone that you're really close to has a disability that they just don't talk about, or that it's just not visible to the eye. So keep this in mind, please, when optimizing. And the thing is, and I said it already earlier, it's not only about people with disabilities, because if you solve for one, you can extend to many. Accessible products create a better experience for everyone. And here I come back to the definition that I already showed you earlier, that where I underlined those 3 words, right? So ability, context, and situation. It's super dependent on context and situation who will benefit from your optimizations. And I have some examples to illustrate this. So for example, when you optimize for good contrast settings, it benefits people who are, for example, visually impaired, because they will be able to read your text more easily. But also for people that use your website or app on their mobile phones in bright sunlight. So for them, this optimization is also beneficial. Simple and structured text benefits people who are, for example, neurodivergent or have dyslexia, but also people who are using your website with your language as their second language. And last but not least, the bigger click and tap targets benefit people with low dexterity, of limited dexterity, but also, and this one is a chosen impairment, people with long nails. If you have long nails, good luck trying to click a button. It's impossible. So you will also benefit from this optimizations. So again, this is not something that happens to you because you choose it, but it's super situation and context dependent who will benefit from your optimization. So keep this in mind. So the last myth, accessibility only affects a few people, is also busted. And now let's move on to the end of my presentation. What the most asked question is that we get as optimizers for accessibility, where do we start? And I have some tips for you. At first, my first tip is really, really important. Just start. We don't ask for perfection. We don't ask for the best experience. It's just progress over perfection. If you are afraid to start, please just start, and small changes can make a big difference. It's also really good to run an accessibility scan as a starting point, for example. There are a lot of companies that can help you with it. Let's say then you have just a starting point, and then from then on, you can optimize and know where you can start. And you can also use this as a prioritization. Run accessibility-focused usability tests, for example, with someone who is visually impaired or someone with dyslexia or your grandma, for example. It's really important to run those tests to see what's going wrong on your website and app to create awareness. And you can also run tests yourself with voiceover software turned on your laptop. This can be really, really insightful to see, okay, can I navigate the website with this voiceover or not? And again, small changes make a big difference. Don't be afraid to start. And lastly, you can add me on LinkedIn, and later today I will put on a post where I will share some insights. And if you comment on that post, you can receive an accessibility cheat sheet. It helps you direct you to the right parts of the European Accessibility Act and helps you get started. So please scan this QR code, add me on LinkedIn, and then I will send you the cheat sheet later today. I will give you some time to scan. All right. So let's wrap up. Things to remember. What do you need to take of today's session? We started with my reality, right? So navigating the digital world with low vision. And I already stated that it's super important to keep in mind that this works for me. This is for me a workaround, but it might not be enough for others. And we now know that it's not only about a few blind people. 1 in every 4 people needs accessibility support, and it depends heavily on how accessible digital domains are. And we also know that good accessibility benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities. It's context and situation dependent, and you can optimize for an overall better user experience. Good accessibility is for compliance, great accessibility is for empathy. You cannot comply to the law, but please keep in mind that this is all about inclusive design and also good business. But mostly empathy. And last but not least, we have the power and responsibility to make digital products accessible to everyone. We as CRO specialists, please keep this in mind with your backlog for the coming period. And that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shirley. That was absolutely incredible. I've noted down a lot of takeaways for myself and definitely going to be testing out Wave. And I think you blew everyone's mind in the comments with the nails thing. I don't think anyone had thought about that. So it's, yeah, it just shows it benefits everyone for sure. Thank you also everyone for attending and all the great engagement in the chat. Shirley, it was going wild in the chat during your talk with loads of people cheering you on, very engaged in it all. Everyone, if you can head back to the lobby, you can ask questions there to Shirley. We have about 4 minutes before the next session. So we'll be starting shortly with our next session where we're going to be talking about offline metrics. But thanks again, please again, give a virtual round of applause for Shirley. She's been amazing and what a great way to start today.
Thank you.